Now, none of us can remember an Olympics during which we've heard the British national anthem played so often, one consequence of having so many British winners on the podium. But when you saw a Scotsman, Andy Murray, with the Union flag around him, or a man born in Somalia, Mo Farah, assert, "This is my country," did it change anything? What about the enthusiasm of the volunteers? Did the success of the athletes or the organisation, or just the sense that the British could have fun, make an enduring difference to the idea, sometimes a vague one, of what Britishness is about? Poet laureate Carol Ann Duffy wrote a poem which suggests we have changed. Here she reads part of it for us.
Translating the British, 2012. A summer of rain, then a gap in the clouds, and the Queen jumped from the sky to the cheering crowds. We speak Shakespeare here, 100 tongues, one voiced.
Be not afeard. The Isle is full of noises. Mo Farah for Great Britain!
We are Mo Farah lifting the 10,000 metres gold. We want new running tracks in his name.
The fastest time ever by a heptathlete.
For Jessica Ennis, the same. For the Brownlee brothers, Rutherford, Ahuragu, Whitlock, Tweddle.
Press high, get the gold medal!
For every medal earned, we want school playing fields returned. We saw what we did. We are Nicola Adams and Jade Jones. Bring on the fighting kids. We sense new weather.
Can you do the pose? Yeah, have a good day.
We are on our march. We are all in this together.
Carol Ann Duffy with a little help from some friends. Now, Akram Khan choreographed part of the opening ceremony. Anna Minton has written a book which touches on the Olympic legacy. Julian Temple's latest documentary, London, the Modern Babylon, was on BBC Two this weekend. Toby Young is a writer and journalist, and Tessa Jowell is, among other things, Deputy Mayor of the Olympics Village. Does it change us?
My duties came to an end
Former Deputy Mayor, sorry, correction. Have the Olympics actually changed us, do you think?
Changed
changed the country.
Well, I think it's too early to judge, and I think that many of the questions that you've asked in the programme this evening will take some time to answer. I think that what's happened over the last, really since the torch arrived in the middle of May, is that millions of people have had an opportunity to be part and take part in a great national moment, and as people have said to me time and time again, to feel that they mattered, and that has come as a surprise to many people. Now, I think that second, lots of people would like that sense of their purpose and their involvement to continue. The question is how, and I think the how will be much more than, has to be much more than rhetorical. I mean, it has to be by a sort of redefined relationship between politicians and the wider public, and giving as in a way, its own way, the torch relay did, much more power to local communities.
But also, I mean, explore it in more detail in a moment, but one of the things about this was that politicians broadly agreed it was a good thing, and that doesn't happen on very many things.
Right from the start, and you know, I firmly believe that, you know, if you undertake a big national project like this, which extends, in this case, in my involvement, for 10 years, the Olympiad lasts for 7 years, the only way you can do it is to create cross-party agreement for the role of politicians to be defined, and then for politicians to stand back and allow the wider public and all the other agencies that have contributed so richly and so well to play their part.
I was struck, Anna, that Frank Cottrell Boyce, who wrote the script for the opening ceremony, he said today it showed that we're a better nation than we thought we were. I mean, do you think there will be long-term effects, but do you think people actually were a bit surprised?
Yeah, I think the opening ceremony was just filled with unexpected moments. I mean, it just took me by surprise from the very beginning. You could see that it had completely departed from the official narratives that are always expected at this sort of thing. You know, prime ministers since John Major have been struggling to find that definition of Britishness, and they've failed miserably. And the opening ceremony somehow managed to open that window. And I think that's what really gave the Games such a big lift. And I was such a critic, actually, I mean, remain such a critic of the economic model behind the Olympics. But the opening ceremony was just absolutely...
Was it worth the money?
Well,
you got to recant. And,
I wouldn't like to put it in those terms,
Yeah.
but when I saw Doreen Lawrence and Shami Chakrabarti carry the Olympic flag, I mean, it was the sort of Britishness that I've never seen defined in my lifetime.
Toby, a Russian friend of mine who now lives in this country, he said to me, the thing that really amazed me was that you could poke fun at yourself. The Chinese couldn't do it, and the Russians won't be able to do it when they have the World Cup. I mean, he did think that was quintessentially British and quite extraordinary.
Yes, I mean, I think our self-deprecation really came through in the opening ceremony and throughout the Olympics with the reaction of some of our athletes to not winning, but we also won a lot as well. I think for me, the real impression left by these Olympics was a kind of resurgent sense of national identity. And for Conservatives with a small c, for whom preserving the Union and clawing some of the sovereign powers back from the EU are the two biggest priorities, the worry was that multiculturalism trumps any sense of national identity, that alternative sources of identity trump a sense of belonging and
There were
nationhood.
two different things, two completely different things.
But I think what the lesson of this Olympics is that we may be multi-ethnic, a wholly multi-ethnic society now, but we're not wholly multicultural in the sense that Britishness still manages to trump other sources of identity. And we saw that most significantly, I think, when Mo Farah was asked by a journalist whether he would have preferred to have been running for Somalia. And he said, absolutely not. I'm British. And when I put on that British shirt, I feel proud, very proud.
What do you think about that? Because it clearly was a big theme, wasn't it? You looked at the people who represent Britain, and they do look like the people that we are, which is all different races and colours and different religions or no religion.
Yeah, I think it is a celebration of what we've already become. And I think we've done that by allowing people from all over the world to come here and be part of Britain, but also retain really strong cultures that they bring to London, particularly the film I just made is about London, and change and improve the city by the diversity of experience and creativity that they bring to a place. Unlike America, where I think you are almost told to forget you're Mexican if you're living in America, here we encourage that kind of multiculturalism. I don't think it's a, you know,
do you think it's not either or? It's not, you know, you're either British or you're something else.
It's a mixture of the two. We're a new pioneering world city that gets beyond the old ideas of nationality and creates a much more expansive, dynamic 21st century place to live, I think.
Does that play outside London, Akram, do you think? I mean, that's Julian was talking specifically about his film and about London, but do you think that's true of the rest of the country too?
I don't know. It's very difficult to say. For me, all I can just add is the same thing, that it was there's been an extreme positive reaction from the people. Every time I was in the stadium, or in the park, I just saw so many different kinds of people that were positive. And what was wonderful was there was a sense of hope. And not just a sense of hope, but a sense of a pride and also a kind of confidence that I've never felt before. I was born and brought up here. You
personally have never felt before?
No, I've never felt. I was born and brought up here. I'm 38 years old, and I've never felt such immense confidence, self-confidence. And I think we need that. And I think that's really, really strong and important for us.
Yes.
I think there was a lot of that, but I think that if you go back to the bid and the way we presented the bid in Singapore, it relied very heavily on confounding this view that so many people in other countries have the Britain, that we were a sort of nation of beefeaters who spend our lives at Stonehenge. We're proud of our heritage, obviously, but that London is a great international, diverse and open city. That was why we took 20 young people from East London as the face of London. They spoke 22 different languages, 20 different nationalities. But I think that, before, I think it's important not to draw conclusions about this too quickly, and, if you like, allow the public debate that's going on and public reflection to influence how this settles in the medium term. Because round the country, the torch relay interpreted that moment of the torch arriving in a multitude of different ways. And that varied, from the West Country to the north of Scotland to the Highlands. And it's important, therefore, to realise that a whole lot of identities were captured in this one event.
But I remember when the French won the World Cup and there was a multicultural, multiracial team, and people said this is good for France because it will bring us all together. A year later, there were riots, and a lot of ethnic minority communities were involved. So it may not mean all that much in the long term.
Well, it's obviously very hard to say, but I can't imagine that Alex Salmond took much comfort from the image of the Scottish gold medal winners wrapping themselves up in the Union Jack. I mean, that could almost be a poster for both the Labour and the Conservative campaign to preserve the Union. And, Sir Chris Hoy, who I think Alex Salmond had very much tried to claim beforehand as a Scalympian, his unfortunate phrase to describe the Scottish Olympians. I don't think he can now be claimed for the Scottish Nats.
Do you see this as a Team GB in a bigger sense then?
Well, I think back to your previous point about whether or not we're going to benefit from this in the long term, a year later in France that there were riots. This has been a great 2-week party for Britain, but the economic realities of where we're at today are far more significant in terms of the social cohesion we'll find ourselves a year from now. My big concern with all of this is what actually this legacy is all going to be about. These games cost us an enormous amount of money, far more money than they should have cost us, because I would say we pursued this broken economic model based on huge amounts of debt and inflated property prices. The question is, we've now paid £10 billion, that's a Conservative estimate, for this park. Is it going to be our park, or is it in fact going to be sold off to one private company after another?
Well, is it? What's going to happen? Is it going to be our park? Are we going to feel ownership of that, as we did feel ownership of the Games?
Well, I think that everybody who has any kind of view in this is determined that it will. And what is interesting, if you go round the park, they're closed at the moment, obviously, because of the security issues in relation to staging the Games. But the connections to the surrounding boroughs have been a very important and specific action to prevent the park becoming a sort of donut. But there is just one other point, which is that I think that the volunteers, 70,000 volunteers, are probably the most powerful catalyst in this. And there are already accounts of how many more people now want to volunteer. A big focus next weekend on a join-in campaign so that people go to their local sports clubs, supported by Olympians, and are able to take up the opportunities to try sport. So this is how change will happen.
Julian, the volunteers question is interesting, because knowing London as well as you do, one of the interesting things was people were coming up to volunteers on the tubes, talking to strangers on the tubes and saying, what have you been doing today, or what are you going to do today? It did seem to bring about that kind of change, which you don't find a lot in the tube in London. In other words, the volunteers played a huge part beyond their job.
Yeah, I think the response to it, everyone's had to the Games has been largely because of that welcoming spirit that they brought. But I think there is a question of volunteering being the answer. What we need in this economic situation is jobs for young people. We can't expect them to endlessly volunteer and be interns and do unpaid work, can we? I think there's a danger of kind of Olympic amnesia, that there's a media feeding frenzy and this whole euphoria of the moment, which is well deserved, but we are back to reality now. The closing ceremony was an indication of that. It was like a bad night at the Brits compared to the opening one, and we mustn't lose the fact that there were riots in London, a year ago because of the extraordinary tensions underlying the city.
And Akram, it's one thing to volunteer perhaps for a once-in-a-lifetime chance to serve the country in the Olympics, and it's another thing to put in the work that many volunteers do in a local sports club, or some of the things Tessa was suggesting. In other words, it might not carry over.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what is the question you asked?
Well, the volunteers, the whole question of volunteers is a one-off for the Olympics because that's full of glamour. That's why people want to do it, but not other things.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was amazed by the volunteers, the amount of work that they did. I know it may feel like a one-off. I think for me what's important is the legacy, this idea of the legacy, to create self-confidence is a huge challenge. The fact that we have self-confidence, for me, if you ask me, am I cynical about the legacy, then I would say, no, I don't want to be cynical. I think you have to put in a lot of work for the legacy to work. It's not just, there is a sense that there's a danger that, okay, the legacy, we're all excited, it's, euphorism, and then suddenly everything's going to drop down. But I think we have to put in as much work as we did as creating the Olympics, doing the whole 2 weeks. It's an immense amount of effort.
Toby, do you think it shoots also the idea that the British can't do big projects? I mean, that's been a staple of the British whinge about ourselves for years. We don't do this big stuff. It's the French that do that.
I visited the Olympic Park last Wednesday and was so impressed by how smoothly it was all running and by how everyone was getting along and all the different bits of it were meshing together. And we went on the Javelin, this fantastic new train which took 9 minutes, and it suddenly seemed as though the narrative of national decline, in which we're a nation that can't do anything right, was just completely at odds with what I was actually witnessing.
Do it right on time and under budget. Depending on which budget you take.
No, not depending on which budget you take. Take the budget that I announced in the House of Commons in March 2007, 9.3 billion. It is still the budget, and the project has come in £500 million below that figure.
Right. Well, we can have another party on that. Thank you all very much. Thank you.